Okay, so I want to give you a couple tips when factoring, especially when you're going to try factoring in your head, and you need to kind of develop what are going to be the factors. So the first thing is the factors of the quadratic. The first thing is to absolutely know how to factor a number. Know what the factors are of a number. And a lot of times this is going to just take time. You know, you can figure out the factors of 4, but then you should be able to factor out the factors of 22, 27, 38, 44, 65. A lot of those are just going to come with practice on going through them. However, there's a couple tips and tricks I want you to know, because I showed you the box method, I showed you the diamond method, and a lot of times when you're getting into your head, there's a couple, or when doing factoring in your head by just writing down a couple tips, there's a couple things that we can use by knowing our values of A, B, and C, particularly just our values of B and C, to maybe figure out what our factors are P and Q. So remember, when we're factoring, all right, or at least when we're solving, we're trying to go from standard form to quadratic form. Now, I wrote these as all set equal to 0 because I was going to prepare for solving them. But I just want you to see, here are our values. It's x opposite of p, x opposite of q. So we want to figure out what are the values of p and q. So when we have a negative number, all right, when our c is negative, we know that p or q has to be negative, right? The larger number has to be negative. And I'm just going to, and it doesn't matter, you know, if I do 12 and I do the factors of 12 are 3 and 4, it doesn't matter if I say p is 3 and q is 4, or p is 4, q is 3. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to kind of use some generalities. So if I have two negative numbers, therefore, I have to have negative p times q. One of them has to be negative. And if my middle term is going to be negative, actually I'll write this over here, so I'll have to have a negative p times q. And therefore, if my middle term is negative, therefore I have to have negative p has to be smaller than q. Or I'm sorry, let's put it this way. P, the absolute value of p has to be greater than q. So regardless of the sign, the value of p has to be greater than q. Now let's go look again. If we have c, therefore I have to have negative p times q again. One of these factors has to be negative. However, if my middle term is positive, therefore the absolute value of p has to be less than the absolute value of q. And let's go and take a look at what are these factors. What two numbers multiply to give me negative 6, but then add to give me a negative 5? Well, therefore, that's going to be 0 equals x minus 6 times x plus 1. So therefore, my p and q is, my p is going to be 6, and my q is going to equal negative 1. So therefore, 6, which is my p, has to be greater than 1, which it is. Now I can solve this. X minus 6 equals 0. X plus 1 equals 0. I don't know why I'm solving these. That wasn't part of the video, but I guess you get some extra steps. So here, by factoring this, so I can say my p, opposite of p and q, therefore, my factors for this one is going to be x plus 6 times x minus 1. So therefore, now, we can say that my q is going to be whichever is my negative 1, which is my 1, has to be less than my q, or my p. OK, so now let's look over here. If I have a value of c, all right, and c is positive, therefore, my two values, p times q, are both going to be positive when my middle term is going to be positive. It just doesn't matter. Both of them have to be positive. It doesn't matter which one is positive, which one's negative. So therefore, I'm just going to add them up. So in this case, I have x plus 6 times x plus 1. OK, and now when I have a positive c, but my middle term is negative, then both of my factors have to be negative. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Now what I've done is I've solved each one of these answers for you. So just remember, when you have a negative c, one of your factors has to be negative. And depending on what the middle term is, if the middle term's negative, that means the absolute value of the negative term has to be greater than the positive term. If your number is positive, that means the absolute value of your term that's negative has to be less than the absolute value of the term that's positive. And if you have an n value that's positive, it doesn't matter which one is negative, which one is positive, because they both have to be positive or both have to be negative. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's just an example of how to help yourself by using B and C to factor when using your head. And then also I solved the problems for you because I'm just that nice of a guy, right? Thanks.